my grandparents. They could own a house and a summer house, have a car, 3 kids, and save money for the future on one income.
I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to afford a house. I don't know how I'm going to be able to put food on the table for my family because of the rising costs.
Inflation equals Great Depression or like great anxiety.
I don't believe inflation is going to stop.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's a treat. But the next day it's just breakfast.
Remember when you went out with only 5 pesos in your wallet?
Now, 1,000 pesos wouldn't buy 2 cartons of yogurt.
You end up begging for the government to provide you assistance.
It's so hard to find food, even if you have the money.
Inflation, it is like a fight in a war.
Hyperinflation is the cause of all of the major totalitarian regime development historically.
Out of the 237 fiat currencies, there has never been a single one that didn't die an early death in hyperinflation.
Civilizations have experienced this throughout time. It happens over and over again.
We are likely to have hyperinflation.
It's just a matter of when is it coming.
The only reason why things get more expensive is because money is being printed.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. As a central bank, we have the ability to create money.
And then government spends that money.
Why would anybody do that? To give government the economic power to enforce what they believe is right, which seems to be infinite wars.
We as a species devote enormous amounts of money to funding warfare.
You could not produce what the U.S. military-industrial complex produces if you didn't have the ability to print money.
To me, that's a horrific and disgusting aberration of human behavior, and I believe we can actually stop that from happening with Bitcoin.
People do not understand how profound this technology is by separating state and money.
Without the success of Bitcoin, financing war will continue, posing an existential threat to the entire species. The stakes are that high. I fear for my life, the lives of my loved ones, and the future of our species.
Sweet. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me again today. We have an awesome guest for you. He goes by Bitcoin Shooter. He made this very cool movie, which I just watched again right before jumping on this. I watched it twice, called No More Inflation. And it's an extremely good movie, beautifully made. This is like a textbook documentary that you would see on like HBO or Netflix, except it actually has important information, which is kind of rare to find these days. It seems like most documentaries out there are, it seems like they're not about really important topics. And I think this is the most important topic there is, and we talk about it a lot here in inflation. So yeah, Bitcoin Shooter, appreciate you coming by, man. Glad we could do this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I agree. I think it's the biggest problem in the world. So yeah, that's why I focused on inflation. So yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate all the kind words.
Of course. So I want to hear a little bit about your backstory, bro. Have you always been a filmmaker? Where did this come out to where you started to want to make movies about these things that you care about and share it with the world?
Yeah, so my friend, when I was 8 years old, his mom had a camcorder and we would make stupid videos. And I think what I liked about it is people would watch it and then they would have a feeling, right? Usually we were making silly stuff, so they were laughing and stuff like that. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then as I got older, I was interested in photography. And so, saved money to buy my own camera and read books and took courses about, composition and balance and contrast and all of these things. And when I was a bit older, I got a camcorder myself and I started editing together family videos, or friends, events that they would have. And somebody saw one of those videos that had a business and asked me to make one for them. So I did that. And then someone else saw that and then I started charging for it. And that's kind of how I was really, what I was doing for the last 15 years. So I never went to school. I never worked on a big set or anything like that. It was always just kind of me making mistakes and going through it myself and figuring things out. And so, 3 years ago, I started doing a bit of filming with Max and Stacy. And I actually went with them on their first trip down to El Salvador. And we filmed a few Kaiser reports and a few other things. And I learned the story of El Salvador through people that I was meeting there. And I was like, whoa, I had no idea this crazy history. So when I got home, I was doing more research and I kind of was infected by their story, and I felt like I needed to like do something or produce something that kind of told their story. It's kind of just swirling in my mind over and over and over again. So on my free time, I spent like a year making that, and then I published it about 2 years ago. Nayib Bukele retweeted it, and that kind of created some more awareness around me, and people were encouraging me to plan a full-length film. And so I knew it was going to be like a year or two of my life if I was going to do something like that. And so I thought, like, what's the most impactful thing I could possibly do? And I feel like Bitcoin is what the world needs most right now. And like we said, inflation and causes so much suffering. And I thought that inflation was the best entry point. I feel like pretty much 99.9% of the population around the world understands the problem of inflation. I mean, they feel it, but they don't really know why it's happening or how life changes as it gets worse. And therefore, they don't really know that there's a solution out there. So yeah, that's kind of how I first got started and how I got to what I'm doing now, and why I decided to work on this film.
Yeah, I think that's well put. Most people have a high level of feeling the pain, but a low level of understanding. So that seems like it's the perfect, that has the most juice to squeeze in that topic, because once you wake people up on it, they're already primed without even knowing it to like understand the situation because they feel it. And it's so important to just get them more knowledge out there, more information. Is the El Salvador movie you made, is that available somewhere online? I wasn't aware of that one.
Yeah, so it's on my YouTube channel right now. I think it's at Bitcoin Shooter, but if not, you can go to nomoreinflation.com. That's where the film is right now. There's some trailers for the film there. If you click on like the title of the trailer, it goes to my YouTube channel. And yeah, that 10-minute film is there, so anybody can watch that and see like the first piece that kind of got me started.
That's very cool. And that's an amazing story. Talk about cool stories to tell. Could you give just your summary of what that El Salvador story is, and you could sort of sprinkle in where you came in and how you learned about it? Because I've never really gone into the El Salvador story here on the podcast before. It's a huge one for Bitcoin especially.
Yeah, so basically in the 80s, El Salvador had a civil war between like the government and some the rebels, right? So it was civil war, and our government was funding the official government of of El Salvador, and the reasoning was that the rebels were communists, and they probably were, and if they take over, then it's going to be a Russian stronghold, and so we have to defend our backyard. And so they were basically given like $1 million a day for, I don't know, I think it was like 8 or 9 years. It was like total to like $300 billion in weapons and training to prolong the war.
Which back then is like an enormous amount of money.
Exactly. And so, again, like the incentive's so messed up because if you're getting $1 million a day to keep a war going, you kind of don't want to negotiate peace, do you? So people suffer because of that. And also what happens is the children are fighting, on like the rebel side. And so a lot of people fled the country during that time because it was just so awful. And a lot of those people ended up in Los Angeles where there were already other gangs. And so the gang MS-13 started in Los Angeles. And in I think 93, Clinton signed an immigration act and sent a bunch of people that had grown up here in Los Angeles that were gang members back to El Salvador. And so when they got there, the gangs took over the country essentially. And, so many presidents were found for corruption and like embezzlement and stealing. And it just seems like no matter what side of the party, like all the governments were always in the pocket of the gangs. And so people, left the country and never came back. It was the most dangerous country in the world at one point, a murder every hour in a tiny little piece of land, it's insane. Like you hear crazy, crazy stories. If you go to El Salvador, the people are so friendly. You'll talk to people on the plane that are from there that are going back for the first time or now finally starting to go back. And they'll tell you stories about crazy things that happened to them. Like, knowing that gangs would dump bodies into holes in the ground where there's like thermal, heat down there. And just that's how they would get rid of them. Just all kinds of horrendous things that people could do to other people. That's what was going on down there. So then You have Nayib Bukele, who gets elected in, I think, 2019, and people don't really, they think, oh, this guy seems to say he wants to do the right things, but they've had so many problems with politicians before, so they didn't really believe it. But sure enough, he started to be more strict on the gangs and was arresting people, and also was embracing Bitcoin. And Bitcoin was driving a lot of tourism in at the time too. And so it kind of put the country in a place where it was like, hey, we have an opportunity here where we're a Bitcoin country and people want to come here, but people won't want to come here if it's not safe. And so around that time, El Salvador had its midterm elections, and Bukele's party gained like a super majority, and they were able to actually start passing laws and larger budgets for military and police and everything. And so, a couple of years ago, they arrested like 60,000 gang members. And, I went down there and I talked to people, and I went to one of the most dangerous areas in El Salvador, which was Apopa. And I asked people like, hey, for real, like, is it changed now? Like, are you really, like, is your life different? And the common thing I would hear was like, yeah, it's completely different. We can actually walk the streets now at night. Like that was how bad it was. And so, a lot of people feel free over there now, and it's been a big, a positive change for the majority of people. So again, it's a dual thing, and I think they kind of go together. Bitcoin gave them that opportunity to have people go there for a particular reason and spend money and invest in the country. And that opportunity, I think, really made them see like, okay, like if we actually fix the gang stuff here, we have a real shot of turning things around. So yeah, it's the name of my film is Comeback Country, and it's perfect. The country's coming back from some really dark times. A lot of people are coming back to the country for the first time and can actually imagine themselves retiring there and living there. And like, I met a woman, and her son met his grandfather for the first time. He's like 21 years old. And it was like a super emotional thing because his dad, right, her husband had gotten killed by the gangs. Like, he just disappeared. And apparently the son looks just like the dad. So when the grandmother, the dad's mother, sees the son, the grandson, it's like, whoa, like seeing her own kid again. And like, you just take that story times a million, man. And that's why people go there and they say they can feel the hope in the air. So El Salvador is a really great story, and it's really like a big milestone in my journey. So I'm grateful for all the people of El Salvador that had to go through those really bitter times to really feel the sweetness of it now. And, of course, for Bukele for providing that opportunity. And also, of course, Max and Stacy, like everybody, I don't know, life's crazy, right? Everybody kind of put me here. And so anyway, El Salvador is a great story. And I'll always have love for El Salvador and the Salvadoran people.
That's amazing, man. Thanks for sharing that. I really want to go to El Salvador. It's been on my list. It's been on every Bitcoiner's list ever since they made their big moves. But for me, I've done quite a few trips south now, down to Colombia and Mexico. But I need to see much more Central America, South America. And El Salvador is just a must-check pilgrimage spot because this is all the things we've been talking about that happen when Bitcoin makes it into your country, how it fixes things. And you mentioned the immigration side, how there's immigrants moving up to the US and then being moved back to the US, and all of that movement of people from their home country to other countries causes all of this strife and controversy all over the place. This is always a big topic here in the US, where I'm assuming you live here in the US as well. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And this is always a huge hot button topic. Like, people are all arguing about immigration. What's the immigration policy? How do we let people in? Should we let people in? Should we kick them out? Everyone's arguing about it. But the bigger picture that people are not getting is, if we can just help these places make their home better, then they are all going to be running away. So there's things that we can all do to help other countries, and we don't even have to go there ourselves like you did, which is an extra cool thing to go really film that and make some content to share with people and spread awareness. But even something as simple as just buying Bitcoin, supporting Bitcoin and, promoting Bitcoin in these countries. Like when I went to Colombia, for example, I'm always trying to tell people, this is why Bitcoin is great. This is why you should check it out. And, promoting it all over the place and just understanding that this is helping free people financially, and it causes a cascading effect. But on that note, I think that maybe we could use a little bit more meat on the bone of how Bitcoin and inflation really tied into that story? Because I mean, this is a good way to sort of bridge your two movies together. Your first movie was all about El Salvador. Your second movie is all about inflation. Now, we talked about how Bukele came in and really fixed all those issues by using a heavy-handed approach. But where did inflation come into the problems they were having, and how Bitcoin as the anti-inflation money really fixed that? How could we weave that together?
So I think in a couple of ways. First of all, like we mentioned, all that money that was given in war and training, during the Civil War, obviously, if you can't print money, then you have to actually have your population, pay for it. And even now, I think there's a good amount of Americans that say, Israel is, I support Israel and what they're doing. But I think if you actually said, okay, well, please pay $1,000 to pay for your share of the bombs and everything, they would probably think about it a little harder. They say, well, I do support them, but I'm not enough to pay for it. So I think inflation is money printing. It's creating new dollars, more monetary units. Some economists will say, well, even if you had a fixed supply and there's a wheat shortage, and bread goes up in price, that's inflation. No, that's not inflation. I'm not going to call that inflation. Inflation is when you can print the money. And when you can print the money, you can give El Salvador $300 billion. So I think if there's no more inflation, if there's no more money printing, how long does that war actually last, right? Would that many people have even fled? You can't even imagine. It'd be like a million times better. So I think in that way, and then of course, part of the film touches on foreign aid, like you were saying. If we just make these places better, we won't have to deal with the immigration. But people, we're giving them foreign aid, so what's not working, right? They're getting tons of money in aid and loans and everything like that, and so why isn't that aid helping? And I think, again, with El Salvador, I'm sure, they've been borrowing money from the IMF. And when you do that, IMF, the International Monetary Fund, when you do that, you have to agree to certain things. You have to agree to, this is how long you can have a president for. This area here has to be allocated for foreign companies that aren't going to pay any taxes. You need to devalue your currency by 50%. And so they're only able to do that because they're able to give them money that's printed out of nothing. So, yeah, I think, in a world with no more inflation, all of the things the government wants to do have to be taxed by, paid by taxes. And if they're paying by taxes, and you're not doing a good job, people are just going to stop paying. And and it's sad because that same foreign aid puts the government in between a rock and a hard place. Because you say, I don't want immigration, but I want to get cheap goods from other countries. I want to give them money to incentivize them to keep making the coffee that we want over here, or whatever it is, the mines, the coal, or whatever, the different minerals. And so you do that because you're trying to combat inflation and you're trying to keep it down here, but then that's ruining these other countries because they're spending all of their production making things for us instead of taking care of themselves, which is why in Africa, 80% of the food that people eat is imported from the US. Crazy. You're creating the problem by trying to catch up. All of this comes down to inflation. You're trying to hide inflation. You're trying to keep prices down because, you're printing money for all this types of spending, especially war. And as a consequence of you trying to fight that and trying to figure out how to make it work so that you can keep printing money and make everybody okay, you're just destroying everything. So yeah, I think it ties into everything, right? I mean, money it touches everything, and that's why Bitcoin is so profound.
And that's I'm really glad you brought up that point where I said earlier, we should be helping these other countries. We have to really scrutinize that definition of help because the government's definition is to send bomb money and weapons. And they call that help and foreign aid. And they say that that's, how we're helping them, and I'm sure we always say that it's to make peace, but it's really not. Like you said, the incentives are then aligned in a way where they want to keep the violence going so they can continue getting their free money and stuff from us. And so it's our responsibility to understand as citizens, understand this is what's going on. When we just hear on TV that we're sending foreign aid here, foreign aid there, it's pretty much always some wrapped up violence. And this is why you go all around the world, and when I travel, you can feel this. People feel negatively toward the U.S. pretty much all the time because we are causing all these issues, and they know it. We just don't know it because everyone here is brainwashed by the media. we don't have the education around what's actually happening because they print the money and they control the media as well. So they really, through the money printer, they get to just have all of these things very nicely handled. And it's only just recently that people are starting to wake up to this and figure out, oh man, all my history books I read in high school saying that we're the good guys every single time, maybe it's a little more complicated.
Yeah, no kidding. And, a lot of people are kind of perplexed when they see Graham Hancock in the film. A lot of people don't know Graham Hancock actually wrote a book about foreign aid in 1989. And
I didn't know that. That's super cool.
Yeah, it's called Lords of Poverty. I found out reading Alex Gladstein's book, Hidden Repression, and Alex Gladstein cites Graham Hancock's book many times. And I think Graham Hancock summarized it perfectly in my film. He says that he's never seen a country that's gotten rich by being given for like aid. And in fact, he illustrates an example in Somalia where there's the southern part of Somalia and the northern part of Somalia, and the southern part's a complete disaster, and the northern part is actually flourishing. And the only difference between these two bits of the country is that one doesn't get any foreign aid, and that's the one that's actually doing well. So yeah, it's a means of keeping a country down, countries that could become revolutionary and keeping them down. So it's nuts, man. And with what? With paper, with not even paper, with just numbers in a screen now. That's the craziest thing to me is like you put those two things on a scale, all of that suffering, and what enables that is like literally nothing. It's just like a symbol. It's literally, it's crazy, man. I haven't wrapped my head around that thought fully, but it's just nuts that you can do that with such a thing.
It doesn't matter how many years we study this. It's still so mind-blowing that so much damage and chaos can be created with literal nothingness just because they can, just because this is the way the system is built intentionally since the Federal Reserve, where, a small handful of power-mongering psychopaths can just send infinite money and power projection wherever they want. And none of us else can do anything except create a new form of money that can't be printed. And Bitcoin is here. And this is why I think it's such a powerful solution, because most people think there is no solution. The early part of the rabbit hole for so many people is, oh my God, this is so fucked. Like, what are we going to do? There's nothing we can do. They have too much power. They can, they have control over the media, like we said, the war machine. All the people are brainwashed. Like, how the heck are we going to claw our way out from this system that's so broken? But, and I think your movie does a great job really showing, first of all, your experience going through that, of just like the dark part of the rabbit hole where it's like, man, like this is such a big problem. And then realizing that the Bitcoin really solves it. So could you walk through your timeline of that period of maybe despair and just coming to the realization that Bitcoin actually fixes it? When did that happen for you?
Yeah, so fortunately, I was learning about all of these problems while I was learning about Bitcoin, right? So at least there was always this safety net of like, okay, well, at least there's an option, right? But I always say, and this is a common story I hear from many like Bitcoiners, a lot of people learned about these issues early on, and they would like go and try to help Ron Paul or Rand Paul. They joined their political groups and they thought, hey, we can maybe push this way. And that really, I think, like disillusioned lots of them, because they're like, man, like we can't play their game. They make the rules, like there's no way in. And so a lot of people who knew about the problem but didn't know about Bitcoin, they were completely depressed. They would tell me, like there's no way to solve this. And Eric Kaysen talks about that in my film. And I think if you're just a regular person and you walk into a room and you hear Eric Kaysen say like, if Bitcoin didn't exist, I'd be dead, you'd be like, wow, these guys are in a fucking cult, right? Like this is crazy shit. But I think with the film, by the time you get to that point in the film, because I've illustrated how actually like dramatic these problems are, and that, up until this point, we never had money that couldn't be printed. And so if you realize those problems, like, why would I want to have kids? I wouldn't want to have kids for what? Like to bring them into a world to have more suffering, not to mention the stress, the financial stress of like even imagining it, right? And it goes up the scale too. A lot of people only have one kid. They would want to have two, or three, and they only have two. So, so anyway, that's what the goal was to really paint the picture of the problem, right? Like people won't value a solution until they understand the problem. And so, yeah, that's the idea, was drag people out into the deep waters. The first half of the movie is like a horror movie. And then the second half is like, it's definitely much more hopeful and optimistic, but it's also very realistic in saying no one's going to save you. This is a matter of taking personal responsibility and understanding the inflation that's going to come and how you're going to deal with it, and so yeah, I just felt like that was the most logical sequence of questions that someone would typically have, and so that's what the film goes through. What does life look like as inflation gets worse? So, I talked to people in Jamaica with double-digit inflation, Argentina with triple-digit inflation, Venezuela with quadruple-digit inflation, and then also like Weimar Germany. And we go through war, we go through food and health, we go through foreign aid, we go through COVID and bailouts, and and then ultimately into Bitcoin, that it can't be printed, and that here's some good use cases of energy, reducing pollution and bringing power. So really, what it is it illustrates the problem. It goes into Bitcoin as a solution, and then it covers the common objections that someone, the preconceived notions that they've had in their brain. So yeah, that was kind of the best way I thought I could go about it.
Yeah, you just brought up a few really great points there I want to touch on. The first one is probably, you listed off a few different countries there that you brought up that have especially high inflation, like Argentina, Venezuela, the type. Why should people, even in the Western world here in the USA, care about this? Because I hear that all the time. That we're the U.S. We're fine. We're safe from everything because we have the biggest money printer, and everything always works itself out here. It's only the other countries that have to deal with this. So what do you say to that?
Right. I would say, if you just think about the trend and prices over here in the West, they've only always gone up. Of course, everyone knows that. No one expects prices to come down, right? But the thing to realize is that it's going up faster and faster. And so if it doesn't stop, like it's never stopped, if it continues, what do you think is going to happen? You're already going month to month. You're already barely affording, to live. How are you going to afford food? Okay, do you think you're going to be able to eat the same food you're eating right now? If it keeps getting more expensive? No, you're going to have to make a change. You're going to have to eat less, or you're going to eat something shittier or something like that. But realize that if this thing never stops, and it never has stopped, eventually it's going to go the way of Jamaica and Argentina. Argentina, a crazy amount of people work for the government, and in the US too, we have millions, 20 million people working for the government. If you look at those things and you don't see the correlation, I think it's maybe just because it's too scary of a thought to really have. But if you really actually think about it, you'll realize that this only heads in one direction, and it only goes faster. And I think actually now is perfect because Trump got elected. And I think a lot of people are hoping that he can solve inflation to some extent. But when that doesn't happen and the prices continue to climb, I think people are really going to have to ask themselves a really difficult question. If this guy can't do it with Elon and Vivek, and he has the House and the Senate, I don't know, I don't follow that stuff very much, but if he has all the power to do everything he wants and still doesn't fix it, then who's going to fix it? And the answer is you yourself. You have to take responsibility for yourself, and you have to realize that there is an option, and the only thing to do is to opt out and to put your money in another money that people can't print. I mean, it's pretty simple.
I'm really glad you brought up the spicy political side there, because there are so many people on the Trump side who have figured this out, that inflation is a big problem, and they made it a huge thing that they're interested in. And I'm with you, man. He comes out and talks about how he's going to fix it, and he has, a bunch of people who are there and they're really passionate about fixing it. It's going to be at the very least quite interesting to see what happens here, because are they going to be able to even put a dent in it? I personally doubt it, but we'll have to wait and see. And if they don't, that's going to wake a lot more people up and realize, oh man, even if, the best team ever to do this can't do it, then you better make a change yourself. Like you said, you're going to have to go sovereign just personally and just buy Bitcoin, because you said earlier, no one expects prices to come down. And I think the important thing for people to ask is, why is this our mental headspace that everything just happens to get more expensive all the time? That's just the way it is. It shouldn't be that way. It should be the exact opposite. As we get more efficient, better at making things, more stronger networking between each other, we have the power of communication across the whole world like never before. We should be getting cheaper and cheaper things. It should be easier to get stuff, but it's getting harder. Even as the country gets richer, the people get poorer, and people are not connecting those dots, that there's something off about all this. And one of my favorite memes about inflation out there is just a bunch of sinking ships, and each one of them is a different fiat currency. Every single one is sinking, but the U.S. is the one that's sinking the slowest, so we think that we're safe, but we're not. And people can feel it, like you said. It's even people here who my friends from college who are making really good salaries but are not in a Bitcoin rabbit hole. I talk to them, and they are having trouble. Even if you're making decent money here, it's harder to maintain a lifestyle you once had because wages are so stagnant and the prices and costs of living are just going up and up. So it really doesn't matter where you are in the world. Like you said, everyone should be able to figure this out, and we just need to keep waking people up.
It's funny what you say about the ships, because when I was in Argentina, that's how people would describe the exchange rate. Like, oh, the dollar's going up, right? But like you're saying, it's not. It's just the peso's going down faster than the dollar. So yeah, I can see how you would think it looks like it's going up, but it's not. You're just going down. And that's one thing too. Like, I don't know what the markets are going to do in cycles and all this stuff, but in Argentina, people are constantly dumping their pesos for dollars because literally they would lose value every day, And if we get to that point where that much money is being created, right? Trump wants to lower interest rates, which I understand because the net interest the government pays is now higher than the defense, budget. And so you have an incentive to lower interest rates, but man, that's just going to put more money into the market. House prices are going to go up even higher. It's like, there's no winning there. And so, yeah, I think that if the price of Bitcoin steadily climbs in the USD, people are they're just going to be like, not even so much of like, hey, I'm going to be sovereign. It's like more like, this just makes sense. Like, it just, it's holding its value better. But yeah, we'll just have to see how it goes. Again, I can't see what they could possibly cut that would make a dent in inflation. And so, yeah, man, it's going to be an interesting next 4 years. That's for sure. But, again, I hope the film is helpful to people. That's really why I wanted to make it, to reach the average person. You have these TradFi guys coming in now, and they're like, retail doesn't matter. It's all institutional money now. That's what's going to pump the bag. But, retail does matter. Those are the people that you need that do the services and the products that you want. And I want as many of those people to be as strong as possible. So hopefully, this will get through to them a bit. I don't know of a better time than now. I guess inflation is going to keep getting worse and Bitcoin's going to keep going up. So maybe the timing just gets better and better. And I think it's just a matter of time before, this film goes far and wide. I'm really proud of it. I pulled a lot of cool people in and a lot of cool Bitcoiners. And I think, like you said, it's really high quality, and it's something that you could see on Netflix or Amazon or HBO. So in my opinion, it's just a matter of time before something like that happens.
Yeah, dude, when I saw that Graham Hancock was in a Bitcoin movie, I'm like, what? That was immediately like, I need to watch this. How did he pull this guy in? What part did he play? Because that's like two totally different worlds of mine coming together. And I'm sure anyone else who's, listened to him before will also just love that you had that in there. So that's super cool. Man, so many places to go with this. I guess when you talk about how the price of Bitcoin will continue steadily rising, one of my worries is that as it keeps going up, people are going to feel more and more like they're too late and they missed it. And one of the things I'm always trying to tell people is, as all of us Bitcoiners do, is you're not too late. We're going to be early for, I believe, another, 10, 20, even 30 years. We're still going to be early to this. This is like a multi-thousand-year technology. This is going to be the permanent new money for humanity forever, because it's perfect. What do you think? Am I being too hyperbolic there, or what are your thoughts on just how early we are and how people should be mentally looking at this new asset that we have?
Yeah, so again, like the phenomenon in Argentina is a steady climb. Technically, they could look at the dollar and say, oh man, the dollars are too expensive now. Like, I'm not going to buy them anymore. But the understanding is that there's going to be more the next day. It's going to be worth more the next day. And so there must come a time in the future when the US dollar price of Bitcoin will steadily be going up, basically it's going to cost more and more and more. It's just a matter of time, right? Like you have so much of a deficit that you're going to have to keep printing more money. Like eventually the confidence is going to continue to erode. So when that's happening, people are just going to want to jump because it just doesn't make sense. Like it doesn't even, it doesn't make sense to hold dollars for more than a month, or more than 6 months or more than 3 months or more than a week or something like that. But of course, right now, whenever I tell anybody, and they're considering buying Bitcoin, I, tell them this is a long-term savings thing. This is money that you put aside that you don't need to touch. Now, you have to plan that for yourself. You want to have some cash in the bank for, in case of an emergency or a health emergency or something that you don't know it's going to come up. You want to have 3 months of, expenses in the bank, 6 months, there's Bitcoin financial advisors that, differ on these things. That's up to you. But whatever you put in, just like, I don't want to hear you bitching to me until at least 4 years later. If you come asking me like, hey, what's going on with the price and everything, I'll ask you, has it been 4 years yet? And if you say no, I'll say, okay, call me when it's been 4 years. Right?
That's a great rule because it's always going to be up.
Exactly. Right. So it's like, I set that out for them in the beginning. And I tell them too, especially if someone's like going to move some retirement money or like a decent amount, it means a lot to them. I tell them like, you're going to get scared. It's going to be scary. You may feel really, really like butterflies in your stomach and everything. And if you do, we can talk about it, but 4 years, man, you got to wait. So anyway, that is, something you'll have to manage on your own. But that's really the opportunity right now is, getting on something that is really just growing and people are figuring out how much it's worth. Like, how much is it worth to have money that no one can take from you, that no one can stop you from sending? That no one can print more of, a lot of people will say money is half of every economic trade. So theoretically, maybe money is, Bitcoin will be worth everything in the world, everything divided by 21 million. So that's a lot. And another thing I've been saying, which I really like, is that the value of a solution is equivalent to the size of the problem that it fixes. So when you realize how big of a problem money printing is, you will start to grasp how valuable Bitcoin is. And then you will realize that, wow, it's that valuable divided by 21 million. Like, that's not a lot. 21 million is not a lot. I think there's more millionaires in the world than that. So, yeah. And then one thing you said was like, Bitcoin is perfect. I agree with you to some extent. I feel like, I'm not sure if a billion people wanted Bitcoin tomorrow, how would this all play out? Because obviously not everybody can have a UTXO, right? So you can have your a Lightning channel if you can actually have a UTXO to start with. Otherwise, you might be stuck in some type of custodian, like a Lightning custodian. And I'm not against that completely, but we need to always have a method of making a run on those banks. We need to have some other form of way to take those sats away from those banks and those Lightning nodes, those Bitcoin banks, and put it somewhere else. So I don't think we quite have that solution yet. But I know that Bitcoin infects people, right? Like, I had to make this film. Like, it compelled me. It wouldn't let me sleep and rest until I finished it. And I'm sure for you, like, if you even tried to stop having conversations like this or working on Bitcoin, you probably couldn't if you wanted to. So I know the same thing is happening with developers. I know that they're working on it. So Bitcoin maybe isn't perfect right now, but it's already proven that it infects people, and those people will have the greatest incentive. Like, it's worth everything. Bitcoin is worth everything. So they're gonna solve it. So yeah, is it perfect yet? No, but it's perfect at infecting us. So, I guess so. I think it is. Yeah, it's perfect.
That's a very solid call out, to be honest. When we get worked up, we're known for this. We just get a little bit too off the rails, and we use a P word too fast. Let's say it is the most perfect thing we've ever made to be money. It's the best money we've ever made by far. There's never been a better one. I think the second place, as most would agree to study this, is gold. Did a great job for thousands of years, protect people's wealth. It was deflationary. It did all these good things, but it lost for a reason. It had downsides, and we've talked about that on the show before. There's lots of good resources on that. I always point people, I don't know if you've heard of Mike Maloney. He's a gold bug, so he's a big gold guy, but he he has this YouTube channel on the Hidden Secrets of Money, it's called, which basically walks through the history of from gold to fiat and how things changed and why gold was much better. And, I just think Bitcoin is digital gold. I really like that framing. And I know some people hate that framing because they think that Bitcoin is so much more than that and it has lots of other things it can do. And that's true. But I mean, if gold did a fantastic job for thousands of years and Bitcoin's even better, I mean, that's pretty dang good money. And we have a good reason to get really excited about it and sometimes get a little too excited about it. Like you said, we can't stop talking about it because it really has the potential to change everything.
I don't think you can get too excited about it, man. I think it's all good. And I think that, one of the most common, feedback I've heard from like normies or random people on the internet after watching my film is that forget Bitcoin, we just need to go back to the gold standard. And I'm like, okay, why did we come off of the gold standard? And how do you know that if we even go back on the gold standard, we won't just go back off again, right? There's reasons why it failed. And, I think they have a hard time trusting something that's digital, but it's just, human nature, I guess, because, I mean, most of them don't send letters anymore, right? You send emails, right? You realize that there are benefits to things that are digital. They tend to be faster to send around the world. And so, I think that's what they should really, I agree with you. I like the gold analogy too. I like saying that it's digital gold because it is the best money and it was hard to print. And people already around the world know that gold is worth something. And if you save gold, then you're kind of like, oh yeah, I'm saving money. So it makes total sense to me. It's like, it's gold, but then engineered to be, to fix the things that were wrong with it, which is it's hard to send long distances and it's hard to store a lot of it in one place safely. And,
it's tough to verify. Like you can mix metals in with gold. You can't mix anything with Bitcoin. Mm-hmm.
Right. And of course, we don't actually know the supply of gold, right? Like it could be more, it could be less. You don't really know for sure. So it just takes all of that and it's just a program for money. So some people will grab it. Some people won't grab it, right? You'll have super early adopters, and so on and so on. And I guess everybody gets the Bitcoin at the price they deserve. But I agree with you. I don't know why people get so worked up about calling it digital gold. I think that makes total sense.
It's because we're Bitcoiners. We just yell about everything. This is the funny thing about people calling Bitcoin a cult is because I've never seen anyone disagree with each other on more things all the time than Bitcoin people. It's just stuff that's actually interesting and matters. It makes you think, so it's so cool to just be part of all of it.
I think we agree on all the other things about, Bitcoin and money printing and everything.
The foundational stuff.
Yeah. Exactly. And then of course, since we all already agree on that, like we don't spend time talking about those things, right? So naturally, like we're going to burn through the things we agree on more quickly. And we're going to get to things that we don't agree on. And that's what we're actually going to spend our time talking about. Because like, okay, we're on the same wavelength on that shit. We don't need to talk about that shit. Let's just talk about the things we disagree on. And it's awesome because I see Bitcoin and Bitcoiners like water. We're just like filling every crack. Everybody's feeling everything out and coming back and making arguments for this point or that point. And at the end of the day, we all disagree on different things and like, that's okay. And that's man, what a great society, right? When you can actually disagree and be like, it's cool though, like I'll still, share a barbecue with you, we can still cheers our drink. We can still like hang out and talk about other things that we like. So we imagine this and we envision this Bitcoin future, this utopia. And the cool thing is to a certain extent, a lot of us are already living that, so it's a good sign. We're trending in a really good direction, I think.
Yeah. And even though, we wouldn't say we're in a utopia yet, or none of us are perfect yet. Like you said, it's the trend that matters. We're all going in that direction. And your movie touches on some of those things that are so common in the Bitcoin world, which is one of which just like family values and, wanting to have more kids and wanting to build more of a legacy. I just talked to Adam O'Brien about this a couple of weeks ago. This is such a consistent thing that Bitcoiners notice. And I find it really fascinating. This is, just an angle that most people don't understand. How could this orange internet coin make you want to have more babies? Could you maybe walk us through how sound money brings us like stronger family units and more love in our social circle?
I think it's because it dematerializes you, because it becomes something that you compare every purchase against. And then it makes you question, do I really need this thing? And then what you realize is most things that you thought you needed are just wants, and they don't actually make you that happy. And really what makes you happy is spending time with friends and family, like, you know, having dinner, having a barbecue, like really just spending time. That's really it. Like their life isn't that, you know, like it's not that complicated. So I think that's just kind of the natural conclusion we all get to, because we start not buying things and we start thinking, well, what am I saving money for? And then you realize, well, it's for family, it's for friends, it's for memories. And so I think that's what happens. We all kind of find, it's like a meme, right? Like just it's a human meme. Like at a certain point, when you have a certain level of clarity, you realize what's important, and that's family, and that's friends, and that's just like memories. Like, you know, I mean, one thing I spend liberally on is steak. You know, like I like buying tomahawks. I like having like celebratory steaks. You know what I mean? We don't pop bottles of champagne. We put a fucking tomahawk on the grill. You know, and I don't know. There's something primal about it. You know, fire and meat, and so yeah. So I think that's why we tend to gravitate towards those things. We're just stripping everything in our life that we thought was important, and, you know, like consumerism, and it's not. So I think that's why.
I love that answer, and that's totally different from what I would have given as that answer. I love it. For me, I would just say, like, it just extends your time horizons, and it just makes you more interested in building a greater future when you have more hope for the future. And so what's the best way to create a legacy? You build a family, and you pass, you know, your lessons down to your kids, and, you know, that is like the best thing we can do. But I love how you talk about how it just brings you through that classic journey really quickly of realizing that buying stuff doesn't make you happy, because there's so many people out there, like so many, you know, rich, wealthy people talk about this, where, you know, they spend decades of their life just chasing dollar bills and making money, only to realize at the very end, when they're older, that none of it really brought them true joy and happiness. And then, you know, some of them successfully figure that out in time to start a family and have kids, and they find that that is where true fulfillment is. Some unfortunately don't. And Bitcoin accelerates that lesson. And, you know, everyone I know in Bitcoin has really changed their mindset about buying stuff. You know, like for me personally, I've never had less possessions in my life than I do now. I pretty much have all of my stuff in a single suitcase and a backpack, because part of that's because I travel quite a bit, and part of it's just because, like, I don't want all this stuff. Back in when was it, 2022, I sold my car to buy more Bitcoin. I sold all my furniture. Like, I literally sold everything from my Austin, Texas apartment, and just stacked some more Bitcoin, saved just enough to go travel to Mexico and stay there for a while. And that kind of began a new, you know, recent kick of just traveling around, digital nomading, finding places where I can, like you, go get some delicious cheap steak, because that's how we celebrate every single day, baby.
Yeah, no, I think I totally agree with you. When you have that thing that you know you can own, and that if you leave it alone for 4 years, it's going to reward you, it gives you like stability. It gives you like, okay, I can count on this thing, right? And yeah, and also I think, like, once you start cutting things away and you start going, okay, I don't want to spend it on this, I don't want to spend it on that, like you're saying, it puts you through that journey more quickly, where you're like, well, what do I want to spend this on? What am I saving this for? What are my life goals? You know? And that's what I tell people too, whenever, you know, I have friends that buy Bitcoin, they're like, oh man, 100,000, like, you think I should sell some of it? I'm like, if it's going to get you, if you're going to accomplish a life goal with it, do it. If it's not that important, just leave it, man. Fucking just leave it and wait, you know, and then let it build so that you can actually accomplish that goal. So I think it makes you think. And again, it's hard. I've talked to people about this, and most people don't want very much, really. They just want, like, maybe a house and some land and a family, and maybe they want to travel and see different places before they die. And other than that, they just want to live and, like, maybe help people if they can. And that's it. So again, I think it just gets you to that point where you're kind of like, whoa, like, life is simple, and people are, life is always, people are more lucky and less lucky, right? Like people are born in other parts of the world and their lives are completely different than mine, much more difficult. But everybody has their own journey, and ultimately happiness comes from how you just choose to judge your situation. You can look at the bad side or you can look at the good side. And I think anyone around the world just being alive for another day is a blessing, man. You got to feel the sun on your face, maybe the wind, you got to eat something, and so I think at the end of the day, Bitcoin does help us, feel happier, but we can all find that happiness right now. It's just a matter of how you choose to look at it and how you choose to, how you choose to judge it.
Yeah, there's so many facets to improving your mental health. And I think that so many people out there right now their mental health is damaged by being in a financially stressed state. That's extremely common. And, talking about families, this is by far the biggest reason for divorce is financial struggles. And it injects stress into the household. So whether it's, you're a single person out there just like struggling to get by, or you're a family who's, having financial struggles, inject some orange goodness in there with some Bitcoin. Listen, throw some sailor videos up on with your next dinner with your sweetheart and just start listening to podcasts. Like, I'm not sure what your introduction to Bitcoin was education wise, but for me, I just started listening to podcasts and just hearing what these people had to say, and it much quicker than I thought it would have started resonating. So the barrier to entry to this is so low. You just download any podcast app, download Fountain, and start listening to any podcast that has a little Bitcoin logo on it. There's so many good ones out there. And
I agree.
It's exciting.
I made the film also to try to trip more people down the rabbit hole, right? Because I think you need to pique their interest, and then they have to have that desire within themselves, like you and I did, to seek podcasts and listen to them. And so I think the film is really a great way to do that. It's kind of like an appetizer plate where you can find out where people or their interests are. Like, are they interested in learning more about, money printing and war, or about foreign aid? Are they interested in Bitcoin mining, reducing pollution, or, refugees able to flee their country with their wealth? It kind of gives you a little taste of everything, and you can see what people grab onto. And one of the coolest things, man, is that the wives love the movie, dude. Like, I think I've heard from like at least a dozen people about like, my girl's into Bitcoin because I'm into Bitcoin, but she doesn't really like talking about it a whole lot. But when she watched the film, a lot of the things that I had told her about were starting to make more sense. And like, I was surprised, but like they were engaged and they actually were entertained. They thought it was really good. So it's kind of a hack for you. If you're out there and you have a significant other that's, doesn't always want to talk about Bitcoin, this might help make it more real. It's really just a collection of stories from around the world of all of these different things. And then from there, maybe they will want to be more open to listening to Sailor or, this podcast or anything else. And so I think the rabbit hole is rich already. You and I are a testament of that. We've gone through it and we've come out Bitcoiners. So we just need to come up with more creative ways to, tip them down the rabbit hole. So,
Yeah, there's just so many different types of brains out there who deserve to learn Bitcoin and be freed by it, And so we can't only make like super technical economics videos about this. There are so many stories out there, like you said, that really speak to a certain type of person. I would say in general, like you said, more women will connect to that emotional side. And I myself would say, I feel like I'm a little bit more feminine in that way, as in I connect more to the people's stories. That's why I have a podcast. Every man has some feminine energy. Every woman has some masculine energy, but there's so many people out there, like the lovers out there, like DJ Valerie B Love. I'm not sure if you know her, but she is like a perfect example, like just an amazing, loving, beautiful soul who has a whole podcast about how Bitcoin creates more love. And it's great to have, this more, I can't remember if it's left brain or right brain, but the type of people that really connect with that sort of thing, and that's why it's super awesome to have more movies like yours coming out and just more content in general coming out about that. So, man, this has been a really great conversation. I feel like this is one we could keep relatively short and start wrapping things up here. But first, I want to ask you, I love accountability and goal setting, recording my goals so I can really hold them to the fire. What are your goals for the movie for this next coming couple of years? Are you trying to push that out onto big platforms or what?
Yeah, so the goal from the beginning was always to reach a massive audience. So yeah, that would really be the goal, is get it on some type of big platform, whether that's Netflix or HBO, or even like, another path is like, going on bigger podcasts, like, I mean, imagine, like Joe Rogan or something like that, right? Then, a lot of people would see it and maybe that would lead to Netflix or HBO wanting it. So yeah, that's the goal. So really, whenever anyone asks me how they can help me right now, I'm just telling them, just watch the movie and share the movie. Because, a lot of these things, it's who you know, right? And the connections that can get you into these places. And so the more people that actually see it, the more likely somebody that is connected, can connect me and make it happen. So, yeah, that's absolutely the goal. Again, selfishly, I wanted to make the film to try to, smoothen out the transition from fiat to Bitcoin as much as I could. And I thought the more average people we reach that stack sats, the more distributed the wealth will be, the more distributed the strength will be, and we'll have a smoother transition. And so, yeah, that is the goal. Somehow, some way, far and wide. And I think, yeah, I'll just keep talking about it. I'll keep promoting it, see what connections come up. And then again, like, I just think this thing's going to age like wine, because prices are going to keep going up, man, and Bitcoin's going to keep going up, man. So, yeah, I think it's got to go on a big platform at some point, So, yeah, I think so. In the next 2 years, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking that as I watched it, just like this thing has a really long fuse. There's time for this to come out where it will be relevant for the whole foreseeable future that I can see, unless the government decides to suddenly be super efficient and, somehow fix everything like we just talked about. It would be so difficult to do. It's going to continue becoming more and more and more relevant, and more people are going to be asking questions about this stuff and looking for resources like this. And on your website, I believe it's $10 or something to watch the movie. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, it's $10. Mm-hmm. You get an 8.21% discount if you pay, with Bitcoin over Lightning. And yeah, there's no platform in the middle, which is pretty sweet. Like if it's on Amazon takes like 50%, for example, right? So it's pretty cool. It's really like the Bitcoin ethos, especially when you pay in sats, like every sat comes to me, you know what I mean? So,
and that's what I did, bro. I bought it with my Nostr zaps, man. So I'm always talking about Nostr on this show, how you can go there and you get paid for your content, posting memes. I've been shit posted for a while, and I got some spending sats, man. So I get to go watch this cool movie and support a fellow Bitcoiner. So there's nothing better than that.
Yeah, the Nostr stuff is powerful, especially in the US, because there aren't very many good Lightning wallets that don't require, the KYC and driver's license and everything like that. It's like a little hack to have somebody just, get the Primal app and spin up a Nostr account, and boom, you can send them sats. It's pretty sweet. And then, a lot of people have Cash App, so they can actually get it if they want to and change it into dollars, like I do that with bartenders, for example, right? Like, hey, you accept Bitcoin and tips, and so, yeah, the Nostr is super cool, man.
Now, I'm actually curious to hear just your view on Nostr for the future, because this kind of falls into that like communication side. You're trying to communicate this out to the world. Nostr is this communication protocol we haven't really even mentioned in this conversation, but I imagine it has to play a big part in the future for content creators like you and myself as well, who have these creations we want to get out into the world. So do you have any plans for like how Nostr will play a part as you continue to promote and grow your movie?
Yeah, of course. I think Nostr is a natural evolution for social media. I think it doesn't make sense really to build followings in any other places, because then you're, at the whim of that platform. So I think when people start to realize that, more people will pile in. And yeah, we'll see. I haven't been super active on Nostr. It's something that I keep saying I'm going to do. I do have posted some things, and of course, like, I've posted some things about the film there, so it's at least there. But in the long term, yeah, I see Nostr really, taking over. Like, I know people talk about the user experience isn't like the best right now, and they don't want it to be like another Twitter, right, with algorithms and things like that. But I have a feeling, I don't know, naively, what I think should happen is, Like if somebody literally like developed a similar interface to Twitter with a similar algorithm, like is as similar as possible to Twitter without having any legal issues, I don't know. And just be like, basically, hey, look, it's like the same shit over here, except it's built on a much better protocol. I feel like maybe that's a way that people are going to get in more easily, where it's like, okay, a lot of things are the same over here. It's just a better platform to build on. But I think it's important strictly as a communications protocol, because again, who knows what's going to happen during this transition, and we need to be able to communicate with each other. And I don't know much about communications, but it seems like everything else is controlled. So maybe Nostr might be like one of the only places we can actually communicate. So yeah, I think it's going to be important.
Yeah, at least communicate completely freely. And I'm not worried at all about the clunkiness now, because it's a free market of apps that are all competing to create the best experience for us. And you mentioned, the potential like Twitter clone in the future. I think I see a future where Twitter will have to become a Nostr client where they'll have no choice, but people will just be like, why do I even use Twitter anymore when there's a better alternative that, one, I can get paid easily, I can't be censored or banned by anybody, and I have control over my own content. I think that, that's a pretty cool idea. In the same way that Bitcoin really swallows up, all the other forms of money and becomes the best by being the best in a true free market, Nostr will do the same in the social media realm. It'll become the true winner and swallow up the rest. Instagram will become a client. Twitter becomes a client. They all have to bow down to the protocol, which gives the people the power over centralized institutions. I think it's super exciting. But
yeah,
awesome, man.
Couldn't agree more.
Cool. All right, give us one last shout out to where people can go find you and your work so they can go give you a follow and check out this dope movie.
Yeah, so on Twitter or X at Bitcoin Shooter, you can find the film and a couple of trailers at nomorinflation.com. And take a look. Let me know what you think. Share it with whoever, and people around the world have been organizing screenings internationally. So if you want to do something like that, or you have a college that you want to screen it at, again, right now, I'm trying to get as many people to see it as possible, because I know that's the path to success. So nomorinflation.com is the best place to do it. And yeah, man, I hope you guys enjoy what represents 2 years of my life.
Yeah, man, that's proof of work right there. Keep up the excellent work, and let me know any other ways I can help support. Looking forward to more great stuff from you in the future, sir. See you later.
Right on. Thanks, Ben.
Nothing else has to change for the average person to feel a complete improvement in their life by just prices not going up anymore.
I buy milk today and it's $1, and I come back next week and next year and it's still $1. Phew, wow, that's great. It's hard even to imagine living without inflation and thinking of prices that don't go up all the time. Would be nice to be able to plan, yeah.
Where there's no inflation, there's no struggle.
Which, in the end, gives us more time to look inwards, more time to determine who am I and how do I want to show up in this world.
That kind of economic environment would lead to unprecedented levels of prosperity, to levels never before imagined on Earth.
That's a utopian world, isn't it? I don't know if it exists, but it would be great.
The inflation problem is a consequence of money printing. If you have a currency with a fixed supply, then you would avoid inflation.
There will only be 21 million bitcoins, with each bitcoin being divisible by 100 million pieces.
Once you show them how easy it is to use Bitcoin, they can see actually how Bitcoin can be useful.
We really didn't expect that.
These computers, they're using a lot of energy.
And because of that, more people can be connected to electricity right away. I don't know if there's something that changes people's lives as drastically.
Between 7 and 10 million people will be reached. I think that's a dream worth going for.
We can go hook right up and put miners right to work, and that energy is being used and that flare is dropped, or if not, gone.
Bitcoin is money that dictators and governments can't stop.
There is no CEO of Bitcoin. It is not one computer. It is hundreds of thousands of computers.
If there wasn't Bitcoin, I would be depressed. What would we use to fight inflation and money printing from governments?